welcome to another episode of the IT Show. Today's guest is Ryan Olson. He's a certified body language coach. Many times people judge us before even speaking to us just by the way our body is. And well, today Ryan is going to be giving us some tips on good body language. So Ryan, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, first I have a few questions.
All right.
What got you interested in body language?
So what really got me interested was I was managing a team of people and read a few articles about the body language of leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership's always been interesting to me, and so I read this, and there was a lot of things in there that were little simple things, but they can have a pretty profound impact.
Yeah.
And so as I got into it, it was just fascinating seeing it, and so up to the point I went and actually got certified to be able to teach it.
Yeah. So since you learned and since you become certified, what has changed? Like, what has improved?
For the most part, I've only been certified now for about a month.
Okay.
So the biggest change is now I'm out being able to teach people about it.
Yeah.
And in my personal, as I've learned these things and personally applied some of these, a lot of it's just in my confidence, the way I feel.
Okay.
So the body language actually has a pretty big impact on that as well, on the way you feel about yourself and the way others perceive you. So that's probably been the biggest change.
Okay, that's good. So I hope after you teach us and after you guys watch it, I hope you will improve and feel better too.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I was thinking there's the easiest way to use body language to make an impact is with our first impression, just like you said, right? So you think about it, when the first thing that people will notice of you, oftentimes we'll think it's the face, but it's the hands. So it's kind of goes back to our evolution as cavemen. When we see somebody, we want to quickly see if they were a threat or not. So our eyes will flash to people's hands. And so that also becomes our trust indicators. And so something very easy we can do with our hands, and especially when we're first meeting people, but really anytime, is to make sure they're visible.
Okay.
So, you think about it too, like with little kids, if they're trying to hide something or they're in trouble, what are they doing with their hands? They kind of, hold it behind their back, and you're thinking, oh, what are you doing? What are you hiding? And that kind of sticks with us subconsciously. And so an important thing to do with our hands when we're meeting somebody is to make sure they're visible.
Well, like you're standing and you're meeting the person. So how do you know where? For me, sometimes that's a problem. I don't know where to put my hands. Should I do this?
Yeah, and that's something that I've had to work on too, because I'd always just put my hands in my pockets. It's like, oh, my pockets are there. It's easy, and I have quick access to my phone too, right? But that's they've actually done some studies, and the jurors, when they're looking at a defendant, if the defendant has their hands under the table and so they can't see them, the jurors they kind of perceive that the defendant is less trustworthy or kind of shifty.
Really?
And so even standing, it's kind of tough when you're just standing there. The easiest thing is just to kind of have your hands loose at your side.
Like this.
Yeah, or and which is it's kind
feels
of
weird.
awkward. It feels a little weird at times.
Yeah.
You can kind of put it on your on your waist a little bit, or do some different things. The biggest though is when you're talking.
Okay.
When you're talking, you want to use hand gestures, and use them to kind of help explain or talk about what you're discussing. It actually will engage people a lot more, and you'd look at it and it's the difference between this and then I'm just talking like this. It's much more engaging, even though, and it's just kind of subconscious, but there's those little things. So the first thing is with your hands, when you're meeting somebody or talking, make sure your hands are visible and they're expressive.
Okay.
Now with body language, almost all things in body language, there's kind of this spectrum. There's a low end, where that's like with our hands, they're hidden or they're stiff, or they're in our pockets, something like that, right? That's the low end. The high end, though, maybe you're talking like this, and it's just, distracting, and it's, we're sitting here and I'm going like this, and it's like, whoa, oh, what are you doing? It's a little crazy, a little intimidating.
Yeah.
And so that's the very high end.
Okay.
So where we want kind of in the middle, where they're visible, they're expressive, but they're not crazy jazz hands going huge, right?
Well, like, are you meant to use your hands throughout? Because I've been giving a speech before, and I was using hand gestures, and I used it well sometimes, but from the feedback, they also felt like it was too much, and at some point it was distracting. And I wasn't going all the way, but I guess sometimes.
And sometimes it is, and there's kind of that spectrum.
Yeah.
So from high to low, and an interesting thing too about that with hand gestures. Now this isn't with all of them, but with hand gestures, it can be somewhat cultural.
Okay.
So if you think, like, on the high end, you've got the Italians. They speak with their hands all the time and and do that a lot, but that's very natural. So if you don't, then they're it's odd. But then you look at, like, the Japanese culture, they're very restrained with their hands.
Okay.
I think I read a study where in was it a 5 or 10 minute conversation, like, Italians use 200 something hand gestures and Japanese about 10.
Okay.
Or something. So that can be somewhat cultural. Also, you don't want to you want to kind of try and tone it for your audience as much as you can.
Okay.
But you do want to use them somewhat. If you're talking and you're just have them very stiff and you're not moving, it pulls away some of that kind of that dynamic or that engagement factor.
Okay.
So that's the first skill is how you use your hands, right?
Make your hand visible.
Make them visible. So like in a first impression, make them visible. Another thing with the hands, and a big part of first impressions is the handshake. So we'll try it out here. So we'll go with handshake. All right. See, so that's a good handshake. That is.
So what's a bad handshake?
So a couple. I'll give you some examples if you want to look. But let me tell you first the good things. First, it's vertical.
Okay.
So you want to have your hand vertical when you go. If you put your hand out like this, that's a sign of dominance, that you want to show that you're more powerful or better than the other person. And if you go like this, it's kind of submission.
Okay.
And so just a vertical handshake's best. As far as pressure, you want to have firm. The best is to mirror the pressure of the person that's your handshake. You're giving a handshake to. Some people come in and they have like that vice grip that's really hard and firm, and it's again that's kind of can be a little aggressive, and then sometimes like I've shook hands with people where they don't even move their hand. It's just they kind of hold it there, and so you kind of take it and it's like okay, but you try and kind of mirror it, but a good firm handshake is good. So the other thing is you want your handshake to be dry, so right now it's not a problem, but some people might have sweaty hands. That happens. Just wipe it off. We don't like slimy handshakes.
Yeah.
So vertical, firm, but mirrored firmness and dry. So those are kind of the three components to a good handshake. Yeah. So that's kind of with hands too, and especially first impressions. Also with the first impression, because often our first impressions they're very fast. And it's usually before we even say anything. So it is our body language, right? Yeah. So first our hands. The next thing is our eye contact or our gazing. The interesting thing with eye contact, right, is there's actually different ways or different types of gazing. And you want to be purposeful in how in what type of eye gazing or eye contact you use. Okay. The other thing on that spectrum, right? So the proper amount of eye contact, and especially in like U.S. culture, is probably about that 60 to 70% of the time. Too little, under 60%, then it's like, oh, they're shifty. They don't, or they're shy or something. Too much, and it starts to get a little creepy, like somebody just staring into your eyes, and it's like, okay, that's enough, right? So it's about 60 to 70% of the time, about 2/3 of the time is a good amount of eye contact. And so if we look at the three different types, so the first is what I would call power gazing. And so that's typically your eyes will kind of make a triangle between the other person's eyes and their forehead. So you keep your eyes high on their face. Yeah. So, and so you're looking, because you don't stare into somebody's eyes, the same time, and you kind of go back and forth between their eyes and their forehead. So that's power gazing. What that kind of conveys confidence and competence, right? And so it's power. And So especially in like business settings or if you're presenting or sharing something, that's probably what you want to use, because you want to convey that I know my stuff, I'm competent, I'm confident, and so you use that power gazing. And that's also important, like, for women in the workplace as well, especially if you work with a lot of men, that can help give you that, that little bit of an edge to say that, hey, I'm competent, I know what I'm doing. And so that's that power gazing. So you keep your gaze, your eye contact high on the face, kind of. Then the next type is more social gazing. Okay. Where when you're like with friends or want to make a connection, and that you kind of, the triangle will kind of flip. So it goes between the eyes and the mouth.
Oh, really?
And that, because our mouths can also be very expressive. And so when you're trying to connect with somebody, you want to be able to see kind of what's their facial expression. So it kind of goes down a little lower on the face. Okay. Now the third time is more intimate gazing. And this is where you're going to go between the eyes and down here to about the base of the neck. Okay. You go lower and then it gets a little creepy. So don't do that, right? Especially in a work setting. So it's, between the eyes and then you come down to the base of the neck. Now the reason for that is there's certain, again, it's subconscious, but when you're wanting to be intimate with someone or get closer with them, you're kind of assessing their suitability as a mate, right? So with men, you're kind of checking the 5 o'clock shadow, maybe their Adam's apple, so that's why it kind of goes there. With women, it's kind of the curvature of the face and the length of the neck and the hair. Okay. And so that's where it goes that way. So that you want to be aware of these different types of gazes. Well,
but do you think people really notice? Like, I get people noticing with the hand and all, but do you think people really notice with the gaze?
A little bit, and again, it's kind of subconscious. So the best way to use this is for yourself, what kind of message you want to send to the people you're with. Okay. Right? And so, because again, with most body language, we kind of understand it and we get feelings or cues, especially like first impressions. Yeah. And so it's important that we're purposeful, that we kind of try and understand what these messages are sending. Okay. And so that we choose what it is we want to send. So like with these eye gazing, right? If we're presenting on a topic and we want to come off as, we know our stuff, we're kind of the expert, we probably want to try and keep our gaze pretty high on people's face. Okay. If it's more where, hey, we want to work together and make a connection and we want to show that we're warm and open, that's maybe social gazing. And then if you're going to go out and, trying to find somebody, then you can go to the more, the intimate gazing, which kind of subtly shows that, hey, I'm interested in you, And again, it's usually very subtle, but it's more in what message are you sending. Okay. And people, they'll pick up on it and they kind of, it impacts that impression, that first impression and then working with them. So the third skill I don't want to go over, which impacts our first impression, is our body posing. So what do we do with our body, right? And so again, kind of on that spectrum, you've got the low end, which is, kind of like this, right? You pull in, your shoulders hunch in or pull in, roll down, your head's down. This is kind of a low power body position, right? And a lot of times if you think about it, if you're nervous or somewhere new, you kind of pull in, you don't want to be seen. Yeah. You might kind of protect yourself with your arms unconsciously. And so that's what it's saying. It's saying that, look, I'm not comfortable. It's a low power position. So when you're first meeting someone, if you want to have a good impression, you probably don't want to be, like, oh yeah, hi, you don't want to be all pulled in like that.
So you may tell the person that you're shy or you're nervous.
Yeah, and and so with this, and then on the other end, there's high power body language, and so this is very expansive, and it's like, I'm going to take up a ton of room and be as big as possible, right? And if I walk into a room like this, and I'm already tall, I'm almost, I'm like 6'5", right? But if I walk into a room like this, people are going to think I'm crazy or just like, whoa, it's too much. Yeah. And it can be very aggressive or intimidating. You'll also see that high power body language, like, in athletics or when somebody wins, it's like, and it is. It's kind of celebratory as well sometimes. And so there's a place for it, but it's not usually when you're first meeting somebody, unless you just won a race or something, then you can be, woo, oh, nice to meet you, but usually you're going to want to be in that middle kind of ideal spot, which I would call our launch stance.
Okay.
And so what that is you're going to have your shoulders back, kind of your body open. Right, they don't have to be way back, but just shoulders open, okay. Your head up, and then your arms are loose to your side or are visible, and that's kind of your launch stance.
So just regular.
Yeah,
just
so regular, like good posture, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's going to show both, that you're open mm-hmm. and that you're confident and competent, and so those three things kind of going together. Right, with your visible and expressive hands, with your eye contact, that's not too much, not too little, and your launch stance, or that body posing, that's going to make a good first impression, even before you start speaking.
Okay, so even like interviews and stuff, you think that helps too? It
does, yeah. And one thing with body posing, like you mentioned for interviews or things, if we have to wait to get in, what do we all do now? We pull out our phone, right? Yeah. Pull out our phone, we're sitting there on it.
Yeah.
Well, usually when we're sitting on our phone, that pulls us in, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we're in this low power position.
Yeah.
And so if you kind of think, well, if the hiring manager is the one that's going to come out and get you to pull you in, what's that first impression you're sending? So you want to be kind of careful with that.
Yeah.
And just kind of be aware that, and I have tried to actually use my phone in a high power position. It's kind of awkward, but I was at the dentist office waiting, and so I was like on my phone. I'm like, wait a minute. And so I tried like this, and I was looking at my phone like that, which, I was like, all right, this is dumb. I don't care what the dentist thinks about me, so I went back to normal. But but just it's something you can kind of think about. Yeah. What's that impression? What are other people going to perceive, and is that what you want them to think about? And so those are just three skills. There's dozens more that we could go over, right? But just to kind of get us off the top, three real easy ones.
Yeah.
Just keep our hands visible, keep them out of our pockets, and keep them expressive. So up above the table or there. Think about eye contact, making eye contact with the people you're talking to, and then your body posing, right?
So not too much and not too little.
Not too much, not too little, but just kind of it's just right, like it's like Goldilocks too, right? It's just right,
Yeah.
But yeah, you do that, and you're gonna have a good first impression with people, and also it's gonna come across as both that you're competent, you're confident, and you're open or warm, which are some of the key attributes to charisma and leadership.
Being more conscious of it and finding a balance between too much and too little.
Yeah, and try it out. The biggest thing that I've noticed as I've done it is really the way I feel, mm-hmm. rather than not even how people are responding to me, but it's the way I feel about myself as I do that, right?
Yeah.
And even sometimes when I'm on the phone, like in a phone meeting or something that we do all the time at work, and I'll sit up more in a kind of my launch position or launch stance, right? And I get more engaged in the call.
Yeah, I've also heard sometimes it actually affects how you speak. So if I'm talking like this,
if I'm
talking like this, there's a difference.
Yeah, it does. And there's like I said, there's dozens of other skills we could go into. And so maybe future sessions, I'm happy to come back and share some more. But yeah, these are just three quick ones that are pretty easy.
Yeah.
And just be aware of them and try them out and see how you feel, see how it makes other people respond to you. And that's one of the big things with this too is, we all can read body language to one degree or another. Mm-hmm. It's kind of it's built into us, and so it's a good way to kind of try it out, see what works best for you. Kind of that that spectrum, right? There's high and low on almost everything. Find out where you are, where you kind of want to be, mm-hmm. and try some things out and see what responses you get.
Okay. Ryan, thank you so much for coming. Welcome. I'm sure everyone learned a lot. It's probably one of the best episodes now.
Okay.
That's it, guys. So next time you're at a meeting, remember to put your hands on the table, and if you catch yourself doing this, remember to do this. Right. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment, and please subscribe if you haven't. As always, remember, impossible is not.